We record the webinar for a couple of reasons. One, we can look at it and see how we can improve, and secondly, it's our opportunity to share the recording with people who are unable to attend. My name is Kuldip Sandhu, and I'm delighted again to be joined by Steve Hemmings from Southend Borough Council, who is going to be talking to us about supplier and contract management in local government and authorities, with some great practical examples of how to execute and get value from these relationships. The agenda for the presentation is going to go something like this. We're going to introduce ourselves. I'm going to talk a little bit about digital transformation and IT optimization. Please bear with me as I continue to admit people. There's more people coming in as we speak, so sometimes I might just veer off. Once I've done that context setting, Steve's, I'll do a quick recap with Steve on what we talked about before Steve talks about what we positioned in our first initial kickoff webinar, and then we'll dive into contract management. We've got a survey poll word cloud that we'd like you to complete, and that will be in Slido. You'll have all the instructions there. We'll then go into supplier management at Southend Borough Council, what they did, and we'll talk about, we'll have another survey poll with a word cloud for you, and we'll try to sum it all up in some key webinar takeaways. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. Use the chat function in Zoom to do that. And me and Steve will pick them up and throw them about between each other to see who's best placed to answer them. If we can't answer your question, we've always got time afterwards to have a chat and a follow up. So there's no issue around that. And finally, that we will have Q&A at the end. But as I said, if there's questions that come flowing through, we'll try to answer them as we go along. Okay, so just a little bit about me. Sorry, I'm going to have to put Terry on mute. Or was that Leslie? Leslie has got to go on mute. And Catherine, sorry. Thank you for that. Yeah, a little bit about me. I've been in the digital IT transformation space for something like 25 years. Worked in public and private sector. There's a whole array of logos there for clients I've worked for, organizations I work for. I've been management consultant to interim CIO, head of technology. And my experience really lies around how you transform the IT function and how we go about aligning IT with the business. And the mantra really now in kind of local government has really been around how we can do more with less, especially with digital transformation. And as you can see, there's a few councils I've worked for. One that you can see there, I was the head of tech and intelligence at Wakefield District Council. And before that, I was one of the lead consultants when I was doing the IT transformation Coventry City Council. And I like to solve digital IT business problems for customer and client value. That's enough about me. Steve, over to you. Can you, I've probably muted you, so I will ask you, can you unmute yourself now?
There you go.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks ever so much. So good afternoon, ladies and gents. I'm Steve Hemmings. I'm the Head of Enterprise Architecture and Digital Innovation here at Southend. My background is mostly in enterprise architecture and IT advisory. My specialisms have always been operating model design, business process optimization, and the way in which you can deliver cost optimization through enterprise architecture. I've had, like Kuldip, I've had a little bit of a varied background in terms of sectors and the roles that I've maintained. Moving through and transitioning from the Bank of England, again, almost private, public sector really, into the private sector where I was at Glue, John Lewis, back into finance for IFDS, then to Darwin, looking at a global transformation there for the recruitment functions across four different countries, into Coyus, and then from Coyus, following the work that we delivered there for their redesign, joined Southend last June.
Thank you. Steve. I'm still admitting people as we go along as well, Steve. So thank you for that. Just let me put some context around what is happening in local government. So obviously, with the onset of COVID-19 and the impact on local government, there's a number of initiatives that have kind of arisen due to the consequence and the impact of that. And I just wanted to highlight some of them and some of the kind of opportunities that these bring. So firstly, I think as we went into recovery mode and we moved to remote working, there was a need to kind of ensure that we protect existing services and addressing revenue challenges, especially aligning them with resident citizens' needs and enhancing customer experience. So I think a lot of authorities went into kind of restore service, maintain service. If we can enhance them, we might want to think how we can get additional revenue through data monetization and maybe AI and machine learning in the future. And also thinking about how we can potentially get enhanced engagement with citizens, especially for the contact center, and this is where I think RPA might become really important. On overarching all that, I think there's been the cost challenge. We came out of we've been in a recession. We're coming out of recession, I suppose, or still fighting that. And there was austerity before that, and I think the cost challenge is still really significant. And I think authorities have been assessing where they can reduce spend, or where they can eliminate any core spend that's not relevant for going forward as we come out of recovery and then start unlocking. And I think one of the things that, and this is why we're talking today about contractor and supply management, is how we can help in that through IT cost optimization. And I'm going to share some of my thoughts in the next slide around IT cost optimization as a segue into Steve's practical approaches. The other thing was, well, we know that the world of work is changed, and everybody talks about a new norm. Well, that new norm will be kind of a hybrid blended delivery model. What does that look like? What does that feel like? How will we still get engagement? This is a challenge, and I think the digital agenda is going to be important for that. So as we tackle many of the challenges in our local authorities, so from addressing adult social care challenges to well-being, regeneration, and the proverbial still continuing to connect with communities and providing them with digital IT skills for businesses as well, and especially youngsters who are trying to get into work, where there's been a shortfall in actually jobs. So I think leveling up and moving the smart city agenda is going to be important in terms of leveling up and connectivity, and how data can provide us with insights to tackle some of those challenges. As I said, this webinar is, whilst I've just kind of given some of my thoughts on what's going on, we're really trying to focus on IT cost optimization. And in my next slide, I just wanted to, and I shared this in the first webinar that we did, but I thought it's important to kind of position it again before we start talking about supply and contractor management. There's kind of 5 bucket areas that you look at when I've been involved in IT transformation. And particularly when the agenda is not so much growth, but it's more about optimizing spend. And you can look at it in different ways. The first one is look at your supply and your demand. How can you cut demand, and whilst you've got a limited supply, how do you can get some level of savings through efficiency by standardizing and working in a compliant way to standards and processes and ways of working. The third area, which we're going to touch on in more detail, is how you can optimize suppliers. So how can you leverage your existing supplier base, consolidate, reduce the tail, aggregate, rationalize, whilst managing competitive tension, stick and carrot, all sorts of stuff, and the commercial models that go with that, and understanding who your partners are, who are prepared to actually go that extra mile with you to deliver value to you and your organization, whilst it's still a win-win situation for both parties. And then that, what does that mean in terms of delivery model? And if you can see the three red arrows, those are the areas that we'll focus on in, as Steve talks about some, as I said, some practical examples of how doing that at Southend Borough Council. And finally, you can actually rationalise the full environment. And I think it's really important to know what your full environment is, knowing the bigger picture, and how then you can tackle some of the things around commercial, supplier, and relationship management with partners. Just a little bit of data. To kind of whet the appetite a bit. You can see here, this is a survey that was conducted by PwC earlier this year in March, where they went out to a whole bunch of 5,000 odd CEOs and said, across public and private sector, say, well, where is the spend going to go? And actually, it's funny, they said they're going to spend, if you look on this bar chart on the left hand side, digital transformation. And if you look at, really importantly for this webinar, the second bar chart, it says initiatives to realize cost efficiencies. So there's two things going, there's two dynamics going on here. One, spending in digital and IT to give efficiency and effectiveness and engagement and collaboration and building networks, I suppose, breaking silos. But the second column, and the columns relate to increase in moderate spend and increase in significant spend, there's going to be investments in initiatives that actually release costs for you to invest. So that's really important to realize that COVID has not only shone a light on remote working and hybrid working, but it's also forced many companies and institutions to look at their cost profile and how to release more, do more with less, and spend it wisely. And a little survey from LinkedIn: who's been the driver for change? Has it been your CEO, CTO, or has it been COVID-19? I think I think I rest my case. I don't have to tell people what the driver has been in that scenario. I'm just checking there's other people still. I'm still letting people in as well. So, okay, we'll move on and into doing some of these initiatives, these digital transformation and even cost initiatives are not easy. They're difficult. My experiences, and having spoken to Steve, we wanted to show this word cloud. Again, this has been collected. This is another webinar that we ran earlier. We asked them to sort of describe the challenges that they see in digital change and IT implementation. And you can see from here, there's some common themes that come out. Culture, a lack of culture of change, resistance to change, buy-in, support, managing your time, providing empowerment and trust is very important and high up on the agenda. So that's just kind of give you a little flavor of some of those challenges that you see as you go along when you implement these initiatives. And we'll talk about those in the examples that Steve will go through as well, and how you can address some of those challenges. Okay, and finally, in our first webinar, at the end of the webinar, we said, well, what would you like us to talk about next? And here's the results of that poll. And as you can see, the top two was contract management, how we've centralized, assessed, and set the roadmap, and how to leverage partners and techniques, hence this webinar. Whilst we're still not ignoring future webinars where we'll absolutely bring across some of our business change and IT transformation landscape, operating model experience and tools and stuff. And when we get to the end of the webinar, we will be reaching out to you again through a poll through Slido to get your thoughts on what you would like to hear next as we finish this webinar. So with that said, Steve, can I hand over to you to set the scene around and recap for where we were when we kicked off the series? And are you still unmuted? I hope you can.
Perfect. Yep, there I am. Lovely. Okay. Thanks ever so much, Colin. That was really interesting. So Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to quickly go through a little bit of a recap as to what we discussed last time, and then we're going to get into exactly what we've done here at Southend around contracts and supplier management, specifically to be able to support the digital transformation that we've got underway. Just going to try and take control of the slides. Always helps.
Do you want me to
Yeah,
press
that's
the button?
perfect. Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
great. Thank you. So responding to COVID-19. So the organisation, Southend Borough Council, was undertaking a department-wide redesign for technology when COVID struck. During that period, a whole new leadership team was appointed and was in place leading up to May 2020. What we then found coming in as the leadership team started to gain an understanding of the estate was that actually it was highly complex. There was multiple architectures in place. There was no limited capability, or there were capability gaps and experience across the organisation. Significantly high technical debt, and there was shadow IT across the wider organisation. And what that really drew our attention to was the fact that we needed to do something at a contract level, working from that bottom up to start taking some order and make some sense of what we've got, what we had in place. So from that, we put together an action plan. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. And that action plan really gave us a sensible and achievable approach to understanding what was in our estate. I won't go through in significant detail here, but in essence, we initiated a number of work streams across both our technical and operating and capability areas to really ascertain what the status was and what works were required moving forwards. And one of the key outcomes from that was the fact that we needed to pull together what we call the contract register, or a single view of all contracts that we as a technology department own and maintain on behalf of the wider organisation. With that in mind, and considering that perspective, and considering what our longer term ambitions were, we were able to define the council's first smart strategy from technology. Previous to that, the department hadn't been operating in such a manner. It had been rather ad hoc, but what we've been able to do is actually bring some structure and direction through the definition of this strategy. I'll very quickly talk through at a high level what the themes are, and then we'll explain why contract management is so important. So the first theme here is smart technology, and these are the foundations which every organisation needs in order to operate. So again, we're not trying to differentiate local authority from anything else. All organisations, including those that you're joining us from today, need infrastructure, they need service operations, they need networks, etc. So what we started to look at there was, okay, within this theme, what do we absolutely need in order to operate, and what do we need that to look like in the future in order to support our longer term ambitions. Second piece was there, or second theme, it was then looking at smart working and the way in which we as a council operate or organise and deliver services. Again, post COVID-19, our working environment is dramatically changing. We've been at home in some way, shape or form for the last 18 months or so, and moving forwards, that model is going to change again. Anticipating the flexibility that was required, we started to undertake a view through the smart working theme as to, and what do we believe that needs to look like for the council, and how do we create that right working environment and experience for our council employees that allows them to be efficient, performant, etc. Theme number 3 then was looking at smart council, and in particular way in which the council as a whole delivers services to the borough and to its partners. This really is drawing on the opportunities to digitise the services. So again, moving away from what probably has traditionally been more ad hoc or paper-based or manual processing, and trying to enhance that experience both from a customer and employee perspective, to say, actually, if we automate some of these, if we drive workflow, if we introduce case management as a capability, etc., we can really make a difference. That's part 1. Part 2 of Smart Council was then looking at and considering our council members, and the politicians for the council, to understand how we can better support them in their roles and responsibilities. And in this particular case, we've done a lot of work to educate and enhance their understanding of technology and their use of technology, so that they, again, could be more collaborative and more efficient in their day-to-day work. And then finally, smart city. So we at Southend have an ambition to become a smart city. It's fair to say that we're still on the journey to really define what smart city means for us. But I don't think I'd be challenged in saying that, one of part of that definition will include being data driven and being able to use that data, the data that we create, the data that is available to us, to inform our thinking and the decision-making process in order to enhance service and overall improve the borough on an ongoing basis. That's very different from what the traditional smart city type definitions and scopes that you see out there in the media. Most of those relate to regional connectivity, transportation. We're taking those as a given and saying, actually, we want to go a lot further and really take that data-driven approach. But throughout all of this, regardless of the theme and the type of work that's responsible, there is a load of tech. There are a load of services that we need to consume, that we need to operate. And to be efficient and effective around those, we do need that contract management. And so what we decided to do was really promote and focus in on developing that contract management capability.
Okay, and that's where that line goes. So to kick this off and get some kind of engagement from the audience, what we'd like you to do is go to slido.com. You can see a little barcode there with a number to import when you get to Slido. We'd like you to create a word cloud with us. And the question we're asking is, please describe your contract management maturity level using the following levels. Do you feel you're at the initial? Are you at the managed level? Are you defined? Are you quantitatively managed, optimized? Initial means you're reactive. Managed, you've got some level of control. You know where you're going. You're defined is kind of working quite well. Quantitative managed means that you're actually managing through data, and optimizes that. You've got everything in place: people, process, technology. You're managing your contracts, and you're continually reviewing them and optimizing them. So if I could encourage everybody to go to slido.com, put in that number and put in the word that best describes where their contract management capability is today. If you're a contractor or a consultant or interim, think about your client where you think they are. And I will stop sharing because I'm going to switch to Slido so that we can show you some of the results, hopefully. Steve, I need you to say if you can. And the larger the size of the word, the more votes people have been putting in for that particular maturity level. So please, can you see the results, Steve, as well?
Yeah, we're coming through now.
Okay.
So we've had 4 votes so far. It's 5.
Yeah.
Quite an interesting blend, different profile.
Ooh, managed definitely seems like level 2. I always think of it as like a CMMI maturity model.
Yeah, that's it. That's 8. I think we can probably get a couple more out of people.
Yeah. Well, we've got 14 plus on the call. So if we can get to 10, that'd be great. We'll give just a few more seconds. And please, once you're in slido.com, don't come out. If it's on your desktop or your mobile or your laptop, please don't come out of it, because we've got 2 more polls that we'd like your participation on. Should we leave it at that one, Steve?
That sounds good.
Well, I think, well, tell me what you think, Steve.
Well, I think it's not surprising. I think it's a good starting point. I think all organisations, certainly in my experience, try to get to a point where they are managed. Trying to take them up those next few levels can be challenging. Certainly, it takes a lot more investment, time, and the quality of resource to be able to get to that level. So in most part, organisations will obviously managed as an acceptable level, and then, you know, sort of park the bus there almost and say, right, that's good enough. So yeah, no immediate surprises there.
Okay, well, firstly, I want to thank everybody for participating, and I have approved your request as well, Steve, so you should be able to drive.
Perfect. Okay, so for the next couple of sections, we'll be talking about contract management and local authority and what we've done here at Southend, and then we'll go back to a Slido, have that poll, and then move into supplier management. So what is IT contract management in local authority? And first and foremost, I mean, for us, we have to start with a problem statement, which was in post-COVID conditions. We know that we are facing budget constraints and the need to be more efficient with the spend allocation that the council has for technology. The reasons for that, I mean, there are a number of risks that I've called out here, but the one that I'd really want to, you know, that certainly rings alarm bells for me is the lack of the single view that impacts ability to be cost efficient and effective. You know, for us, certainly as a leadership team at Southend, you know, our objective is to deliver value for the public purse. If we're not doing that, and we can't do that because we don't have that budget visibility, that's something that we need to take control of. The way in which we've done that is through the introduction of contract management capability. And we set a definition through a policy document that was agreed by all members of the IDMT, or our leadership team here at Southend, which is for Southend, contract management would be the efficient and effective management of all contract types with the intention to drive delivering value and quality for the public purse. So it's quite a broad, but it's quite a strong statement that we were able to set. And certainly when we've taken that position into both audit, finance and procurement, it's really been enlightening for them to see that, you know, that's our intention, that's our mentality that we're bringing in. Again, we are a new leadership team, so the investment that's gone into bringing us in from the private sector certainly now shows that it's bringing value. We had to set a scope to all of this work. I don't know if any of those that are joining are already in other local authorities or government services, but certainly technology departments can become the dumping ground for all types of contracts, whether or not they're associated or can be associated to technology in some way, shape or form. So to protect ourselves and to give us something that we could work within, a remit that we could work within, we said that all technology contracts for services, assets, software licenses and support and maintenance of our technologies, and kept it very broad, but that was a good starting point for us. Prior to the redesign of our department, there had been limited capacity and ad hoc management of our contracts. A lot of good effort or a lot of hard work had gone into trying to maintain some form of management structure around our contracts, but certainly not to the level or degree that we were going to need to be able to optimise and certainly to be able to support longer term transformation activity that we wanted to undertake. And so, in order to progress from there, our initial view was we need to take consideration for who we were going to be working with and what other artifacts and perspectives were important. So for us, you know, we drew up a stakeholder map through the business, technology and vendor suppliers. And that gave us an indication of just what sort of engagement model we were going to be looking like. We then turned to our product and technology roadmaps and said, okay, as we work through these, we are expecting there to be some form of contract associated. We understand the direction that we're going to be taking with those products, applications or technologies, and so that can quickly inform what we need to do with contracts. And then finally, the risk register. So within the department, we have defined our first IT risk register. We record all types of risk onto that into that artifact. There is an opportunity to talk about how we manage risk here at Southend in a future webinar, but more broadly, you know, that really acts as a safeguard for us as a technology department to be able to say we are carrying this risk. We are going to make our business colleagues, audit, finance, etc., aware. So that they can take that consideration forwards in the works that they're doing. So we'll move forwards now. So we've taken a bit of an approach to this, and apologies that there's a lot of words, but this slide deck will be shared afterwards, so you can go back and consume. But in essence, we took a 5-step process to developing contract management. And the first was to build, as we call it, or to create the register. Now, we started with a standard template, and I'll share that template with you again at the end. What we began to do is actually say, okay, what are the data sets that we're going to need in order to assess and manage our contracts moving forwards? And from that point there, what we were able to say is, okay, let's start capturing those contracts as we see them from, existing registers, existing document stores, and from what was kept in our procurement framework catalogue. After that point, what we were able to do, let's talk about timeline. So that took roughly 3 months for us to be able to do that. And the reason being was just the size of that, the size of work required. We had 2 members of staff full-time working on that for a period of 3 months. We were able to assign some form of priority and RAG status to the types of contracts that we wanted to get to first. And that was predominantly based on, what was important to us at the time. What we have found, though, is that, and one of the lessons learned that we found is that you have to take, you have to break this work down into small chunks. You can't just bite it off in one fell swoop. As you go into some contracts, they can become rabbit holes if you're not careful. So we try to measure ourselves on a regular basis to say, are we spending too much time on some of the search in assessing some of these contracts, to avoid us just not getting to the end. The second step was to review the budgets and the portfolio. So whilst we've been able to go out into our file drive, we've been able to speak to procurement, etc. It's not always the only way that you can find out what contracts you're running. So we did a thorough assessment of both our revenue and capital budgets, dating back for 18 months to understand all contract spend. And again, any contracts that were missing were able to be added to our register. And then we looked at our portfolio as well. Apologies for the spelling mistake. But again, looking at our portfolio of works, what were we anticipating to do in the next 18 months? And again, giving us a view of what contracts we can expect or what contracts we would expect to see, given those types of works. Again, that was a 3-month exercise, and primarily because our revenue and capital budgets were being, there was a lot of work ongoing to get those into a fit and meaningful state, but also our portfolio was consistently changing. And that change is something that I'll talk about later in regards to supplier management. As we worked through, particularly the budgets, what we started to consider was the cost profile for the contract spend. So we gave different categories of cost profile so that we could build an overarching view of where our spend was going. And then from that position, we could begin to say, well, how do we want to transform that or adjust it? The cost profiles that we used were run, grow, and transform, which are probably categories that if you're undertaking digital transformation or managing your IT estates, you're probably familiar with. It's a usual buzz set of phrases from Gartner, but that was very useful because what we were actually able to determine was a lot of our spend in contracts was just in the run world. We weren't necessarily growing out any of the technology platforms or opportunities that were available, and we certainly weren't starting to transform those, which when you're embarking on the digital transformation that Southend is quite worrying, and so you begin to see what work's going to be required longer term. With steps 1 and 2 complete, we then move into assessing the contracts. Contract work in itself is a very specialist field. You need a fine level of detail in regards to legal, procurement and contracts to be able to do this type of work. And what Southend actually was brought in a contract specialist to be able to support us on a long-term contract. And what we gave them was an outcome statement that said, please come in, assess these contracts, but at the same time impart some of your knowledge and expertise into our team so that when you eventually do roll off, we've been able to develop our own capability in-house. The work that they conducted was a thorough assessment of value, duration, status, risk and issue in regards to what we're trying to do strategically and to identify what the opportunities and the next steps would be for each of those contracts. Now that's a 6-month exercise. just initially on a profile of probably about 35 to 40 contracts out of probably what we're looking at here, about 140 total. But again, that assessment then was able to inform step 4, which was develop the roadmap. So once we understood what needed to be happened, what works were required per contract, we could then develop a roadmap or a portfolio of works that said, okay, let's understand where we've got renewals, where we need to be doing, where we need to be approaching our vendors and working with our vendors differently to gain more value or improve the contract status as it stands today. This really is a crucial and ongoing task more than anything else, because your contracts never stand still. You always need to be developing your relationships with those contract vendors to ensure that they understand exactly what you're expecting from them. That measuring and an ongoing maintenance does take a considerable amount of time. And what we've certainly found is that without the operating model that we're now in the process of developing, that responsibility would fall heavily onto our managers, and we certainly don't have that capacity. So with that in mind, that's one of the reasons why we've been able to secure funding to introduce this new TOM. And that brings us nicely on to step 5, so that new target operating model. So for us, we are defining and implementing a capability driven operating model. We're outlining what the people are and the roles and the skills and experience that we require within that team, the processes that they're going to need to follow, and the technology and the data that they're also going to need to use in order to be successful. And the outcome for that would be that we would embed contract management practices that direct the department to drive improvement quality and the value for money. And again, that plays back quite nicely to what we said before in regards to our outcome statement and what we're trying to achieve with contract management. One of the parts that I will touch on is the RACI. So I spoke again before about the stakeholders. Who have we been engaging with and why? So the function of contract management sits within IT and under the function of IT performance management. Architecture, which predominantly is my function, was consulted in all of the contracts to understand from a strategic perspective what needed to happen with those contracts, those sets of services or those technologies going forwards in adherence with our roadmaps. We engaged with procurement and consulted with them again to understand what routes and considerations needed to be taken into account when managing those contracts and trying to drive improvement going forwards. Finance was very, very important in order to build our credibility and support from them, and we kept them informed on the works and the works we were undertaking and the outcomes that we were delivering against. The business owners, our contracts unfortunately didn't always have business owners, and that's one of the standard principles behind any contract is that you wouldn't just have a technology owner, you'd have a business owner. So we've been able to start rectifying that by assigning those business owners to those contracts so that someone in the business takes that responsibility. And again, there through the RACI model, they've been assisting us in any works required. It's very difficult to be able to position and encourage the business to take responsibility in some of these, but our team have done a fantastic job. And what we're finding now is that those who have engaged are actually starting to see the benefit and the value behind it, and that in itself is encouraging other business owners to engage. The suppliers and the vendors, so again back to those contracts that we own, there was blanket communications pushed out to all contract vendors to say this is an exercise that we're undertaking. Please be advised, we will be in contact at a certain point in time. That was an initial opportunity for us to start building that relationship with those vendors for the new team. And from that point, for us, it was, this is a clean slate. What's done is done, but we're looking ahead now. Let's be positive. Let's make this beneficial and valuable outcomes for both parties, and wherever possible, those suppliers or vendors assisted. And then finally, IT finance. So we've separated it here, but within the IT department here, we do have responsibility just for IT finance and managing our revenue and capital budgets. And there was an ongoing dialogue with that function to understand exactly what their perspective was in terms of spend, and to ensure that everyone was fully aligned. So that's the approach that we followed. Let's talk about our team. So ICT procurement commissioning process, and thereby identify how a stronger and more strategic approach to ICT contract management can be achieved. That's our target statement. Scope to the left-hand side was defined as commercial ICT procurement management, contract management, supplier relationship management, and ongoing financial administration support. We outlined a target state role, or a hierarchy, as you might also see it, which included 6 posts. We've not been able to recruit into all of those posts at the moment. Again, there are budget restrictions at this moment in time, but this is certainly something that we're working through and developing those roles out in parallel with other functions across, or other departments across the organisation, as a means of just being able to build this capability. The purpose then of this team was clearly mandated, and was part of the business case that we drew up to take to finance to request funding and financial support to develop this TOM. The purpose that I think I'd recommend everyone take into account is to drive value for money for ICT commercials. Again, this is probably something that isn't always thoroughly appreciated by ICT departments, but it's something that certainly is very, very important. The second one was to provide proactive delivery of contracts and supply services that are managed in a proactively providing a streamlined procurement process. What we'd found previously is that any of the contract management, whether it be contract renewals or new contracts in place, didn't offer that slick and efficient delivery. And so what we found is that all of the contracts actually started off on the wrong foot, the wrong mentality. People were already disappointed or frustrated, and that simply wasn't the right way to start a contract off. So we felt that it was appropriate to focus there on rectifying that situation. The third purpose was to enhance ICT contract procurement and properly informed decision making. So again, as we go on our roadmaps to deliver the necessary technologies or the change to our organisation, thoroughly understanding what procurement is required to inform those decisions, and to understand just how complex some of this work would be. And then finally, to improve accountability. So not only within the department, but across the board, to enhance exactly how we were going to make the right decisions, ensure that there was transparency and visibility across this function, and then more broadly across. And then finally, what we actually took was an existing benchmark and framework for contract management to identify the competencies and skills. And it was really interesting to get feedback from our finance and HR colleagues as we put forward this TOM, as we explained exactly why these skills and experiences were required. I think this had previously been overlooked to an extent, and so people didn't understand it. But as you explained, this is why you need market development skills. This is why you need basic contract law knowledge. You could see the light bulbs coming on, and then for them to realise actually this is why it's really important. We can't just rely on junior officers just being able to undertake that task. This is why we need to bring in external support, whether it be through contractors or third parties, to help develop this team. Just try and go to the next slide now.
There we go.
Yeah. So it's safe to say that our progress has enabled us to realise several outcomes, and we have been very, very successful in achieving those outcomes. We have achieved some form of cost optimisation, and latest total was that we've been able to deliver 30% savings across, on average, across our contracts throughout the period. We've been able to achieve service improvement in the delivery of those contracts across key services, both of which have improved the performance of our technologies, but also the performance of services that are delivered directly to our residents within the borough. We've been able to develop our first procurement schedule, which gives those colleagues within procurement an understanding and an insight into what works are going to be required for our contracts moving forwards. So you actually mitigate or any need to be doing things last minute. And so, you know, with that understanding, visibility, and forward planning, you can actually ensure that you've got the right resource available to you, therefore negating any capacity or demand issues. And then finally, and the most important one for me, has been improved supplier relations. So cost optimization, fantastic that we've achieved 30% savings, but it's an ongoing process. You have to be very structured and very disciplined in achieving these optimizations on an ongoing basis. It's only achievable through good supplier relations, and what the team here at Southend has been able to do is develop those partner relationships. Sometimes it's not always easy to have those difficult conversations, but the team here have done a fantastic job in doing so, and now we're in a better position where, especially some of our key contracts now have the necessary support and account management behind them to deliver the right outcomes. So finally, the lessons learned. So three categories here that I'll draw your attention to. Number one is engagement. This type of work can be complex and is probably new to many of your business colleagues and even those within your technology department. So notify them of your intentions and why you're doing this early doors. Really take the time to reiterate the benefit and the value that you're looking to gain from this activity, and what approach you're going to take. Give regular status reports and progress. Don't just, don't become a fire forget. We're going to start this and we'll come back to you at a later date. Actually hold yourself accountable to those regular reports. Even within our technology department, that's actually helped to build credibility for that function and the way in which that function has been led. With that credibility, you then gain more support, more understanding of the complex task. And so in that, you probably get, the opportunity to ask for more help, which is always useful. And finally, and we'll come on to this one in the next section, is develop that strategic partnership arrangement with your key accounts or with those vendors and suppliers. Next category is around setting the expectation. It's not just about what you want, it's about what other people need as well. So what we did here is we went into finance and procurement and said, what do you want? What do you need from contract management? And we took that into account as we developed our own approach. We said that we would keep our expectations simple. We'd achieve the quick wins first, again, to build confidence, build some credibility, and then develop on forwards. And then finally, be realistic. Don't say you're going to get all contracts managed under a 3-month period. It's not going to be possible. Set reasonable timeframes for this. And again, back to the engagement piece, show your progress and your status. If you're having problems, if you're having challenges, don't be afraid to say so. People need to understand the complexity of the job that you're doing. And then finally, build incrementally. You don't want to achieve too much too quickly, because what you can sometimes find, and certainly in my experience in previous roles, is you do cost optimization and people say, right, the savings is done, thank you very much, move on to something else. It doesn't work like that. To maintain optimized, you need to be maintaining those contracts on an ongoing basis. And for that, you need to be reasonable with yourselves and with your colleagues. And again, that plays back into setting expectations. And as part of that building incrementally, fail fast, adopt the test and learn policy, mindset and culture within that team. It's okay to fail here at Southend. We support each other in failing, we pick each other up, and then we're able to move forwards in that. We, especially with contract management, and where mistakes can cost, certainly financially, there can be financial repercussions. We don't adopt a blame culture. We say, okay, there has been a mistake here, and we try to rectify that. And certainly if you've been able to develop those strategic partnerships and relationships with vendors, sometimes when mistakes have been made, it is possible to reach out and say, look, there's been a mistake here, can you help us through this? And in most cases, those suppliers have been almost happy to help on the basis that they know that it's the right thing to do, and they've got that moral fibre. So that's really good. Okay, I'll pass back to Coldeep now to roll Slido poll 2.
Thank you, Steve, for that insight. Really great stuff. And we'll come on to some of the lessons learned on top of that as we go into the next section. So we're back to everybody. I want to keep you lively and engaged. So what we're now asking you to do is go back into Slido. You've got the bar code there and the number for the survey poll. We're going to create another word cloud. And what we're now asking you to do is to describe your supplier relationship management maturity within your authority, or if you're an external consultant, of your client. So five levels again. Sorry, 6 levels. What am I saying? 6 levels: initial, managed, defined, quantitatively managed. Sorry, is 5, and optimized. Where do you think your supplier relationship management maturity is? What level is it at? I'm just going to stop and share my stop the sharing and switch back to Slido to start sharing the results again. There is the survey poll on Slido. Please put in your supplier management word. Yeah, okay. Okay, there's a race going on between initial and managed. Do I need to take you off? Steve, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right.
Really
so,
interesting, the profile that we've got here.
Yeah, we got 8 responses last time, so I want to get to 8. Come on, folks. Use those fingers. Where do you think a supplier relationship? And if you think about what you said in the kind of contract management, supplier management, relationship management are kind of symbiotic. They both go hand in hand. So if you were managed or initial in the first poll, I think you're probably going to be very similar in the second one. That's my thought process. But
Definitely.
Yeah, one more. There we go, Nully.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what's your thoughts?
Not surprising, really. I think it's nice to see defined up there, to say that there are some people that are actually able to reach that level. But certainly if things are okay, so managed, yeah, definitely coming through now. I think that's a reasonable level to get to.
Okay.
And certainly at that point there, it offers some value and benefit. I think it just depends on, what your supplier, the scope of your suppliers looks like, who your suppliers are, and then wider those types of considerations to take into account.
Okay, so let's get your thoughts of the work that you've done at Southend on supplier management and some of the relationships you've nurtured and developed and why were they so strategic and why so important to the council?
Thank you. Just take back control.
Yep.
Okay, so for us, building strategic partnership relationships has been vital in delivering contract management and delivering the business outcomes. I can see a couple of our colleagues from our partners have joined us today, so thank you for that. But in terms of the scope, anyone who has a contract with us has the opportunity to become a strategic partner in our perspective. Doesn't matter how small or how large you are. If you understand what Southend is trying to do and you can demonstrate a mindset and culture that you want to support, you want to help us achieve our outcomes, then you can be a strategic partner. I've listed here a few of the big names that we have. Phoenix in particular have been excellent. When I came on board, it's fair to say that the account needed to do some work to come up to the level that I expected of it. But the team has done excellently in being able to demonstrate that they can go on that journey, that they can support. And we recently were able to award them our Microsoft E5 contract for the next 3 years, which is an outstanding Well, it's a significant investment for us, an outstanding piece of work from Phoenix to be able to win that, given the competition that they were up against. But it's the mindset and the way in which they position themselves as to say, look, this isn't just a transactional relationship. If you need to do some work and we can help, we will find the right route to do that. It's not just going to be about treating you as one of our public purses that we can go in and say they've got monies and we'll take from them as and when we can. The mindset really is about understanding what we're trying to do and offering that value. The same goes for NTT. So NTT is our won our reward for, or our contract rather, for strategic transformation partner. And through that, NTT now engage with us to thoroughly understand what we're trying to do, both at a technology and business perspective, and offer us consultancy and delivery support to achieve those outcomes. And then finally, from a smart city perspective, City Fibre is one to call out. Again, since the introduction of a new leadership team, they've really put in the hard yards to broker those relationships, to reset, and to be able to say how they can support. They're doing fabulous work across the rest of the country, but they're always coming back into us to say, okay, this is how we can support Southend, which is really encouraging. And I think across those partners, what the important thing is as well is that we at Southend are very mindful that we need to facilitate those vendors, those suppliers getting the outcomes that they need. You know, it's not just a one-stop shop. We can't just be sitting here going, oh well, at Southend have got their outcome, so that's okay. So awarding contracts, you know, we follow the due diligence and the process of procurement where we need to. But what we've actually been able to do is leverage the marketing opportunities that we've created. So if there's a point where I can join LinkedIn or I can write a media release that says this is what great work they've done, if I can go to my peers in across local authority and government and be able to recommend those, then I know that helps. And certainly I know that some of the opportunities that have come their way have certainly come from that reason. So that's always positive. And the approach that we've taken, and certainly when I came on board and set with a number of these partners that you see in front of you, was to set accountabilities and responsibilities early. I work my account managers very hard. I play fair, but I work them very hard, but I reward those with feedback and recommendation, again, wherever possible. With all partners, we hold weekly calls. It can be on a personal level. You know, I could be sitting in a coffee shop and I know that, you know, 11:30 in the morning, I've got to speak to Tony at NTT, but we'll have that chat. And again, that helps to build that personal relationship where people understand that, and that always helps. We offer strategic and roadmap briefings in regards to what we're doing at a business and a technology level as well, and that informs them as to what direction they're going in. What we then say to those partners is, okay, given the insight that we've given you, how do you think we could help? You can help us. We give them some of the ideas that we have, but then we rely on them actually putting in the legwork to say, well, we're going to come back to you. And as they start to do that 2, 3, 4 times, you can really see that they want to be strategic, that they want to play more of a role in what we're trying to do here longer term. And then finally, we do feedback and forward planning sessions. So it's important to look back as much as it is to look forwards. So we look back, we reflect on the works and the outcomes that we've achieved to date. We do press ourselves hard to say, where can we do better? Where can we improve? What hasn't gone so well? If there are those difficult conversations to be had, we have them, but we're very amicable and polite. But it's important that all parties know exactly where they stand. And that really has been delivered through the cultures and behaviour. So we can have this approach, it's all well and good, but actually it's the culture and behaviour that we've been able to grow here through that approach. So, you know, we appreciate that there's a development path. You don't just become strategic partners overnight. We adopted the Tupman model. You might know it as forming, storming, norming and performing. But, you know, we recognise that with all of these, there was a lot of history in play. As much as you can say, right, we're going to wipe the slate clean, draw a line in the sand, move on, fresh start, you know that there's going to be a process moving forwards. So we always relate back to that. We do establish that close relationship and understanding. So wherever possible, we do communicate, even if it's beyond the weekly calls or the strategic meetings. Microsoft Teams has certainly allowed us to do that with a number of our partners, because we now just hold Teams chats where we can be talking to our partners on a day-to-day basis. And then they become an extension of your team. And it's not only your account managers, their SMEs could just be joining, or could have one-to-one chats with your engineers. And before you know it, they're offering advice and guidance, where before that would have been quite difficult. Transparency and honesty, again, back to that feedback. When things are going well, reward them. When they're not going well, or you think they can be improved, just say so. It can always be very difficult. But certainly if we recognise and celebrate the positives, when it is the negative part, we can say, well, look, it's not all bad. We've been very successful, or we're doing the right thing. It feels like it's moving in the right direction. Accept on it, build on it, and then we can move from there. And finally, excuse me, the last point that I will say is COVID has been very, very stressful and a difficult a period for any technology department to be able to manage. It has resulted in I'll happy to say a ridiculous amount of knee-jerk reactions and we must do quickly type of work, which we've been almost reliant on our strategic partners to be able to support. That certainly isn't the way that we want to be operating longer term, because that isn't the right way to operate as an organisation anyway. But we recognise the reason why and the position that we're in. So what we're always trying to do is say, okay, let's find that new balance, let's find that that stability, and in that you can see that actually we've got the right mentality and approach moving forwards, and certainly that's gone a long way to build respect for what work and what role that we play here, but also the credibility in the way in which we approach it as well.
Thank you, Steve. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to whiz through the takeaways and then get into our final poll. Because I know some people have kind of have probably got meetings and stuff. So let me just whiz through this. I think what we'd like you to walk away with is the fact that COVID-19 has shone a light on business change, from remote working to other digital initiatives. And there's going to be investment, but there's also going to be initiatives that are going to be focused on cost efficiencies. And those business cases are going to be really scrutinized for business value. And that's why it's so important to develop strong relationships with your third-party partners and suppliers, so that they can demonstrate the value that they will bring for those initiatives. So it could be cost release, value enhancement, whatever it might be for the customer experience, to cost takeout, as I said. And it's important to start with that, looking at that end-to-end journey, as Southend Borough Council have. They've looked at the wider journey. They've really given some transparency and openness and trust that they've built with their partners and suppliers. And actually, they've got cost optimization savings plus relationship wins. And there's wins not only for the council, but also for the partners as well. And it's understanding what works for both and in that delivery model. And I think the other piece to just a final piece is fail fast, learn the lessons and go again. I think Steve stressed that in the work that they've done, supplier and relationship contract management. So final I think some special thanks there, Steve, to some of the colleagues that you've worked with. If I just quickly show those names and then say, let's do our final survey. What we'd like you to do is stay with Slido and just tell us what you would like us to talk about next. And we're happy to take any questions. So if we could, again, the questions we're asking, or the options that you have, is, would you like us to talk to you about how to develop an IT target operating model? How do you go about rationalizing your IT landscape? How do you deal with technical debt? What capability models would you like to available to kind of future-proof your technology department? Transformational change at business and IT level. What does that look like for an IT function? And finally, would you like to hear about digital simulation training so that you can apply gamification, a safe environment to understand the change decisions that you might want to make. Could I just quickly ask everybody to whiz back into Slido and make their option on the Slido poll, please? And there is the options.
Interesting response already.
Good.
Got a
Ooh,
tie at the moment, so we need a couple more.
Yeah.
And if people are struggling in Slido, I think now that we're at the end, if you want to just chuck it, oh no, there we go. Okay, so there's 6. If you can't use Slido and you just want to use the chat at this stage, feel free just to use the chat.
Yeah, please do add your response. Oh, we've got a bit of a tie going on. Steve, what's your thoughts?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think capability modelling certainly is the way forward, in my opinion. But I think what we could, yeah. So it's good to see that one. I'm surprised that we're not seeing the technical debt or the IT landscape in any way, shape, or form. But that might just be the audience for today. I think we could take that away and make a decision, and then get the next session set up. Maybe do something as a combination.
Yeah, I think you know, Steve, that I've got a big focus on that sim training, because it really allows you to make 3 years decisions and play them out and see the impact in your organization or institution. Well, we'll debate which one first,
Sure.
but happy to do the operating model, capability model stuff as well. Just like to kind of just switch back to the presentation deck and just close off, just to say, you've been listening to these two chaps for over an hour. Thank you for your time, taking your time out. I know everybody's busy, but please connect with us. Please give us any questions and any follow-ups that you want. I'm sure Steve's available to answer any questions on the South End side, and I'm more than happy to support that, and thinking about what you would like to hear about in the future, and particularly anything around digital IT transformation approaches. So I think I'm going to say goodbye, but Steve, do you want to say anything just as a wrap up?
No, thanks very much for hosting again, Coldeep. And yeah, any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for your comments. Thank you, Terry, as well. Yeah, and we'll put the webinar to a close, and just thank you for your attendance again. Take care, everybody.
Cheers all. Thanks.
Bye.